How medieval soldiers ate to survive the hardest battles. Have you ever wondered how medieval soldiers fought for hours without collapsing from hunger? Unlike modern armies, they had no guaranteed supplies. They relied on simple foods, ingenious strategies, and even extreme measures to survive. In this video, you will discover what these warriors ate, how they stored food, and what they did when it ran out. And at the end, we will reveal a food so powerful that even the Vikings relied on it to survive. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of medieval nutrition? The basic diet of medieval soldiers. A medieval soldier's diet was based on simplicity and endurance. Unlike the feasts that nobles enjoyed in castles, common warriors depended on durable and easy-to-transport foods. The most fundamental item in their diet was bread, but not the soft and fluffy kind we know today. Medieval bread was dense, often as hard as stone, and made from coarsely ground grains. To eat it, soldiers would soak it in hot broth, beer, or water. Another staple food was porridge, made from oats, barley, or wheat slowly cooked in water or milk. Though bland, it was highly nutritious and provided long-lasting energy. Some versions were enriched with herbs or even a little honey when available. Meat was a luxury for common soldiers. When available, it was usually salted or smoked to prevent spoilage. Pork and beef were common, but in difficult times, even horse meat might be consumed. In coastal regions, dried fish was also a popular alternative. Knights and high-ranking officers, however, had access to a richer diet. They could eat fresh meats, cheeses, eggs, and even spices, which not only improved the flavor of food, but also helped with digestion and preservation. Garlic, for example, was highly valued for its medicinal and energizing properties. Another essential element in their diet was beer. Yes, medieval soldiers drank much more beer than water. Potable water was difficult to find and often contaminated, whereas beer, having undergone fermentation, was safer and more nutritious. Weak versions of the drink were consumed throughout the day, ensuring hydration and a light calorie intake. This basic diet was enough to keep soldiers standing through their exhausting training and long marches. But the real challenge began when armies went on campaign, facing weeks or even months away from any stable food supply. The challenge of feeding an army on long campaigns. Staying well fed in a castle or village was already a challenge, but during military campaigns, the situation became even more complicated. Medieval armies had to cross vast distances, often for weeks or months, with no guaranteed supplies. To avoid starvation, soldiers carried long-lasting foods such as dried bread, salted meat, cured cheese, and beans. The problem was weight. Carrying enough food for an entire army was impractical. That's why armies relied on supply points along the way, where they could purchase or seize provisions. Pillaging was a brutal reality. When an army marched through enemy territory, food was taken by force from local peasants. This not only weakened the enemy's land, but also ensured provisions without the need to carry large stockpiles. However, when lands were poor or had already been raided, starvation became a real threat. Some leaders tried to organize supply chains, hiring merchants to provide food to soldiers. But these supplies often did not arrive in time or were stolen along the way. Knights and high-ranking officers had servants and wagons to carry extra provisions, but common soldiers had to make do with whatever they could find. Another major challenge was food preservation. Without refrigeration, fresh meat spoiled quickly, especially in hot climates. To avoid this, armies used salting, smoking, and drying, methods that ensured meat lasted for weeks or even months. Grains and flour were stored in tightly sealed sacks to prevent pests and moisture. In some cases, soldiers had to resort to extreme measures, eating roots, herbs, and even insects to avoid starvation. And when food became truly scarce, even more desperate strategies had to be used. How knights ate differently from common soldiers. While common soldiers settled for hard bread, porridge, and salted meat, knights had a much more sophisticated menu. As members of the nobility or military elite, they had access to a much richer and more varied diet, ensuring more energy and endurance in battles. The biggest difference was their access to fresh meat. While common soldiers depended on dried or preserved meat, knights often traveled with live animals, such as chickens and pigs, to be slaughtered along the way. Hunting and fishing were also options, allowing for much more nutritious meals. Another privilege of knights was their consumption of dairy products, such as cheese and milk. Cheese was especially important because it could be stored for long periods without spoiling and provided essential proteins and fats. Fresh milk was rarer, but some knights drank goat's milk or even fermented milk similar to kefir to maintain gut health. In addition, Knights had access to spices, something unthinkable for common soldiers. Black pepper, ginger, and cinnamon were used not only to enhance the taste of food, but also for their medicinal properties. Some spices were believed to aid digestion, provide energy, and even prevent diseases. Beverages were another distinctive factor. Wine, often mixed with herbs, was used both for relaxation and as a revitalizing tonic before battles. This dietary difference meant that knights had superior physical endurance compared to common soldiers. But when war dragged on and supplies began to run out, even the most privileged warriors had to adapt. What soldiers ate during battles. During battle, stopping to eat was a luxury few could afford. In prolonged combat, soldiers needed quick and efficient ways to eat without compromising their safety. Unlike modern armies, which have ready-to-eat rations, medieval warriors relied only on what they had at hand. The most common battlefield food was hard bread, which could easily be carried in a pocket or tied to a belt. Many soldiers carried small pieces of dry bread or travel biscuits, made with flour and water, which could last for weeks without spoiling. Some soaked the bread in beer or water to make it easier to chew and absorb more liquid. Another popular food was dried meat. Small pieces of salted meat could be eaten quickly, providing proteins and essential minerals to replenish energy lost in combat. Knights and officers, when they had time, could eat small pieces of cured cheese, which was also a practical and nutritious food. Campaign soup was another solution armies used. During moments of pause, simple broths were prepared with grains, herbs, and dried meat, helping soldiers stay hydrated and warm, especially in cold climates. For drinks, weak beer remained the main choice. Since water could be contaminated, fermented beverages were safer and helped quickly replenish calories. In more organized armies, soldiers could receive small portions of wine mixed with herbs, which was believed to enhance physical endurance. However, food was not always available. When battles dragged on or an army became surrounded, soldiers had to resort to extreme survival methods. When food ran out, extreme survival methods. Armies did not always have enough supplies to feed their troops. In long campaigns or prolonged sieges, soldiers could go days without a proper meal. In these situations, hunger became as dangerous as the enemy itself. One of the first alternatives was hunting and fishing. If the army was in an area with forests and rivers, soldiers could hunt small animals such as rabbits, birds, or even squirrels. Fish was also a valuable option, especially for armies near lakes or rivers. However, this required time and skill, something that was not always possible in the middle of a war. Another strategy was consuming wild plants. Some soldiers knew about edible herbs and roots that could provide basic nutrients. Plants like nettles and dandelions were often boiled into improvised soups. However, the risk of poisoning was high, as distinguishing safe plants from toxic ones was not always easy. When no other options were available, soldiers turned to unthinkable sources of food. Horse meat was often eaten in critical moments, despite being a valuable asset on the battlefield. In extreme cases, there are reports of soldiers boiling leather from boots and belts to extract some form of sustenance. The worst-case scenario occurred during prolonged sieges, when supplies were completely depleted. Historical records describe instances of cannibalism in besieged cities, where desperate inhabitants and soldiers resorted to eating corpses to survive. Although extreme, this type of practice has been documented in several medieval wars. Faced with these hardships, armies learned to refine their supply tactics and food preservation methods, ensuring that hunger did not defeat them before the enemy could. The role of beer and mead in soldiers' diets. In the Middle Ages, clean drinking water was unreliable. Wells and rivers could be contaminated, and diseases such as dysentery and cholera spread rapidly among soldiers. The solution? Drinking beer and mead instead of water. Medieval beer was very different from what we know today. It was usually weaker in alcohol and consumed in large quantities throughout the day. In addition to being safer than water, it also provided calories and essential nutrients, as many beers were made with malted grains, herbs, and even fruits. For soldiers, this drink helped replenish energy without causing dehydration, making it a fundamental part of their diet. Mead, made from fermented honey, was a more sophisticated drink associated with elite warriors. Vikings and knights often drank mead at feasts and banquets, but they also used it as a stimulant before battles. It was believed that this drink strengthened the body and mind, making warriors more resistant to pain and exhaustion. In addition to these fermented beverages, some troops drank wine mixed with herbs and spices, considered both invigorating and medicinal. Hot wine mixed with cinnamon and cloves was especially popular in cold climates, helping to warm the body and improve circulation. Although the image of drunken soldiers in battle is often exaggerated, consuming these beverages was essential to staying hydrated and avoiding disease. After all, in the midst of war, an army weakened by infections had little chance of victory. Medicinal plants and spices to increase endurance. A medieval soldier's diet was not limited to bread and dried meat. Many armies used medicinal plants and spices to boost warriors' endurance, strengthen their immune systems, and even treat wounds. Garlic was one of the most valued ingredients. Known for its antibacterial and energizing properties, it was often eaten raw or mixed into soups and stews. It was believed to prevent infections and provide extra stamina for fighters. The Romans had already used it to strengthen their soldiers, and this tradition continued into the Middle Ages. Onions were also an essential food. Rich in nutrients and easy to store, they helped with digestion and disease prevention. Soldiers often carried dried onions to eat during long campaigns. Among spices, black pepper was extremely valuable. In addition to enhancing the taste of food, it aided digestion and blood circulation. Pepper was so prized that in some regions, it was even used as currency. Ginger was another important resource. Used to combat nausea and muscle pain, it was mixed into hot drinks and consumed by warriors before battles. Another common plant in military camps was sage, considered sacred by many cultures. Used in both food and infusions, it was believed to improve concentration and speed up wound healing. Even without modern scientific knowledge, medieval soldiers understood that certain foods and herbs made the difference between life and death. The strategic use of these ingredients helped keep armies strong and ready for battle. Food preservation techniques for long wars. Without refrigeration or vacuum-sealed packaging, keeping food in good condition during military campaigns was a major challenge. Medieval armies had to use efficient preservation techniques to prevent food from spoiling before it could be eaten. The main strategy was salting meat. Cuts of beef, pork, and even fish were covered in large amounts of salt to remove moisture and prevent bacterial growth. This method ensured that the meat could last for weeks or even months, making it one of the most common foods among soldiers. Another popular method was smoking. Meat was hung over a fire and exposed to smoke for hours or days. This not only helped with preservation but also improved the flavor and kept insects away. Smoked fish and sausages were common among armies marching through cold regions. Grains such as wheat and barley were stored in tightly closed linen sacks, protected from moisture and rats. Flour was also carried, but it needed to be used quickly before it spoiled. Bread, on the other hand, was made in extremely dry and hard versions, like hardtack, which could last for months. Aged cheese was another valuable food source. Made with less moisture and more salt, it could endure long periods without refrigeration. Cheeses similar to medieval Parmesan were highly prized in military campaigns. Additionally, fruits were dried under the sun to extend their shelf life. Figs, raisins, and dried apricots were among the few sources of natural sugar available, providing quick energy to soldiers. Thanks to these techniques, armies could remain supplied for longer periods, reducing their reliance on looting and pillaging. However, even with all these methods, there was one medieval food so powerful that it became essential for warriors, and is still used today. The secret medieval food that survives today. Among all the foods consumed by medieval soldiers, one stood out for its longevity, high nutritional value, and ability to keep warriors alive even in the harshest conditions: pemmican. Although its origins are more commonly associated with indigenous peoples of North America, records indicate that similar versions of this food existed in medieval Europe. Pemmican was a highly concentrated mixture of dried meat, rendered fat, and sometimes dried fruit, creating a compact and extremely durable energy source. This food was perfect for military campaigns because it did not spoil easily, lasting months or even years without refrigeration. And it was rich in protein and fat, providing long-lasting energy for marches and battles. And it could be eaten as is or mixed with hot water to form a nutritious stew. In addition to pemmican, another widely used food was hardtack, a type of travel biscuit made only from flour and water. This extremely hard bread could last for decades if kept dry. Soldiers often had to soak it in soup or beer just to make it edible. These foods have stood the test of time and are still used today. Pemmican, for example, continues to be consumed by explorers, soldiers, and even athletes who need a durable and efficient energy source. Hardtack also inspired modern military rations, designed for long shelf life and balanced nutrition. Medieval nutrition may seem simple, but its effectiveness was remarkable. Soldiers of the time learned to extract the most from their available food, ensuring they were ready for any battle. Lessons that still resonate today.